If you've ever wondered how a relationship with someone who's your complete opposite could work or even thrive, this episode is for you.
313 studies with over 35,000 participants found that similarity was a strong predictor of attraction in the early stages of a relationship.
I would highly doubt that any relationship could be successful if your morals and your values were like diametrically opposite. They hunker down and they're like, I'm not changing. I have my interests and I have the way that I operate and I have my morals and values and nothing's ever going to waver that. Then you're never going to be happy or successful in a relationship because you're not being open to it.
On your mom's side in particular, very, what's the word?
I don't know. What is the word, Jeff? Welcome back to another episode of First Rounds on Me, a First Rounds on Media production. Before I continue on this intro, I just have to say I am exhausted. Are you not exhausted?
Would we say 8 flights in 2 months?
8 flights in 2.5 months. We just got back from Australia. We're heading to New York tomorrow, which like on one hand, I'm so internally grateful of the fact that we have like the means and the time to be able to travel around the world visiting our family, but I'm exhausted.
Yeah, and we're on super jet lag with Australia.
And then going to New York's going to be even worse, but anyway, we are back with our monthly one-on-ones where we dive into some of the most personal, powerful, and sometimes challenging conversations we've ever had. I think for today's talk, we're diving into a topic that I find really fascinating and I know that we can relate to very heavily, and that is the age-old question of whether opposites truly attract. We'll explore the reasons behind this phenomenon, why it might work in some relationships while leaving others in chaos, and how embracing our differences can lead to deeper connections. Beyond just types, we'll be looking at how our expectations in dating and relationships influence our choices and how these expectations can evolve over time. So if you've ever wondered how a relationship with someone who's your complete opposite could work or even thrive, this episode is for you. Hey.
Hi. Do you think that we're complete opposites?
I think we're opposites in a lot of different ways. So do you not agree?
Yeah, I don't think we're complete opposites, though. I think physically you thought that we were complete opposites, but
physically,
like,
physically,
the type conversation
of like physical type.
Mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean by opposites attract? What's your definition?
You could be talking about a whole different spectrum, but mine more so is kind of like when we talked about this a couple of times on the podcast of like. Not morals and values, because morals and values have to be kind of like pretty similar for you to be in a long-term relationship. Otherwise, those cracks show pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. It's more so physical appearance could be one, but I think it's a melody of like your interests and your hobbies or the way in which you approach communication, the way in which you approach conflict, how you've grown up. Like there's so many different ways that you could be opposite and you could also be attracted to someone who is opposite.
Yeah.
Do you not agree?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think opposites attract in morals and values is really difficult to make work.
I think that's a non-starter. I think that people think that they can make that work, but I would highly doubt, and I'm no relationship expert, but I would highly doubt that any relationship could be successful if your morals and your values were like diametrically opposite.
Yeah.
You not agree? But
yeah. I mean, some people switch religions and stuff like that, and some people say that they don't want kids and then change their minds.
True.
Probably a lot more difficult, but yeah, I think
it'd be really difficult to work though. I think there would have to be like a lot of love, communication, trust, and respect that came along with that, which unfortunately doesn't happen in every relationship. But I think if we talk about opposites attract, we kind of have to start at the dating phase, right? And that kind of comes down to type. Like when we think about what we prefer in a partner, and we've talked about types so many times on this podcast, but like we go, okay, so what do we prefer in a partner? What is our type? What is our checklist of like the things that we want in a partner? And how negotiable are they when we go into the dating world, when we actually meet somebody?
Is there a question?
I mean, it's just kind of more of a jumping off point for you to have a discussion.
Yeah. There was a stat that I told you the other day I think was really compelling to me, that the cliche is that women want a guy who's 6 feet who makes $100,000 a year. And if you break that down, that's 0.002% of the population. And that's not taking into account if they're married, where they live, and what they look like. So I think that stigma in itself when it comes to a dating app profile and opposites attracting is pretty compelling in the sense of like, you might, but odds are you're not going to find somebody who's 6 feet and makes $100,000 a year. But
also I wonder to myself, like, and if we purely base it off that kind of like that statistic or that want that seems to be quite prevalent within women, like where does that come from? Why do we automatically want someone that's 6'5" and makes over $100,000 a year?
Well, it's superficial. And I think I think there is a biological sense to it. Obviously, the best quality for a guy is height, just physically. It is. It's just a
Really
sense of
think
it's
it's
a
smart
sense of
Elvis.
protection.
Okay,
It's a sense
yeah.
of he's superior physically.
Hmm.
And then I think same thing with income. It's a sense of security financially, but there's just not that many out there. So I think the want in itself is fine, but then the reality of getting that want is a little bit different.
Well, I wonder if like the manifestation of security should be kind of formed in as you said, there's like a biological kind of sense to both of those things. But if the statistic is true of the fact that it's 0.002, and I'm guessing it's a hell of a lot more than 0.002 of women that want that in a partner, what do you think some women could be looking for instead that kind of give that sense of security?
Yeah, I think not losing the sense of security, maybe even cutting that in half, saying, you know, maybe it is something physical that's a sense of security that you want. Maybe it is monetarily that, you know, because I don't think it's fair to say that women shouldn't want a guy who's financially stable or shouldn't want a guy that's physically got physical attributes, but maybe it's broadening that a little bit and also adding things to that. Maybe you do meet somebody who's very compassionate and you feel safe in that space. Maybe you meet somebody who's got a lot of ambition and they're not making that monetary value yet, but that's to come. So I think it's just broadening that and having different ranges of that safety and security.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really well put. If we bring it back down to like what we were talking about in terms of us, I think we're very opposite in like our interests. First and foremost, like as a more of like a superficial layer. Like we've talked about this a couple of times. Like I couldn't give a fuck about sports, and you love it. You could watch it all day, every day. You literally, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and you're looking at sports statistics, and just like being a nerd out that way. Whereas I'm more geared towards like the arts and to like literature and all that kind of stuff. But then I think as you start to peel back the layers, we've learned through our almost 2 years of marriage, which is very exciting. But then also just like through the years of our relationship, is that we also are quite opposite in perhaps like communication styles and conflict styles as well. Do you not agree?
Yeah, I think we're opposite in a lot of senses. I think that communication style, family history, I think family history and communication style are very intertwined.
Agreed.
One thing that we always talk about is Jay Shetty's gifts and gaps. You know, you want to take beautiful things from your parents that you like, but then also the things that you didn't like, those gaps, you want to change and make better for yourself and your partner. I think that we have a lot of gifts and gaps together. I feel like your family, we just spent some time with them in Australia, and I was telling you very, very, on your mom's side in particular, very, what's the word?
I don't know. What is the word, Joe?
Sentimental and loving in a sense of
Touchy-feely,
like touchy-feely, right? Very touchy-feely. My family, not so much. A lot of guys, a lot of...
It's really hard to pull a hug out of them.
Yeah. So different, but another side of your family is a little more disconnected with the relationships. And then my family is very connected, you know, from a relationship standpoint. So yeah, there's gaps and gifts that I love the touchy-feely side of your family. And I love how close my whole family is. So it's just like...
Well, I think that kind of really touches on the fact that like one of the more beautiful things about opposites attract, right, is like you pull things, and it's kind of like the gifts and gaps that come from like parenting styles or like family styles in general. But then you pull it into opposites attract is like you just kind of pick and choose the parts from like your family, pick and choose the parts of your former life before you met your partner of things that actually complement your relationship. Like I think that the basis of why you love sports is the like camaraderie and the team kind of aspect of it, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of different reasons. I think sports pushed me to limits that not being involved in sports could never push me to. Like even with coaches or other competitors really pushing you through a threshold where you're like, oh, I didn't think that I could do that. I think that really steamrolls into life because you kind of realize if you do push yourself to a certain limit, you could do a lot. And then, yeah, that team aspect, the team aspect in the sense of like what a lot of people can do together, but also the team aspect in how do you pull the best out of different people and different personalities and figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are and how to utilize all those things differently. It's kind of like a science that I really was fascinated with. And yeah, obviously the bond that I have with my father with sports and my brothers, and then my love of numbers kind of has taken over.
It's like this perfect storm, really,
Yeah.
isn't it? How would you say that we've integrated like my hobbies and my interests into our relationship?
It's a good question. I think that we should probably keep doing a better job of that now that I think about it, because not to say that my hobbies and interests dictate what we do, but you're just more
Agreeable.
flexible.
Yes.
Yeah, agreeable and flexible. But I think being around the people that are interested in your hobbies has really helped me. Like, a lot of your friends are into music and art and photography, and just being around that world and culture I really like. It's a little bit more creative, and I don't want to say sophisticated, but just, yeah, it's a different world.
It is a different world. And like, I understand what you're saying. It's not sophisticated, but there is like there's just something, a different edge to it. But again, I think both of those worlds complement each other. I learned something from you, so you learned something from me. And I think that bring it all the way back to the very beginning of this conversation, and like type in dating and then further into relationships, is like you think that you want something, and when those interests and hobbies perhaps don't align straight away, it doesn't mean that they can't serve each other. It doesn't mean that later on in the relationship they can't serve each other, and you'll find like a really beautiful common ground, or you'll learn something from each other. I think more often than not, if you're open and you're willing and you can communicate about it properly, then it will like complement what's going on.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston in The Breakup. She was very much into art. He was very much into sports, but obviously it didn't work out. They broke up, and it's a terrible
Didn't they
breakup.
get back together at the end of that movie though?
No.
Oh.
They ran into each other, but
but
yeah, they just kind of had a good flow in the sense of they were very opposite. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting. Like I try to look to the people in like our lives, or even people in like past lives, where like, not like past lives woo, but like my past life before you, of like people who were opposite, and how, if I really think about it, how they worked and what they did. And I think it all, and we preach this all the time on the podcast, but it all comes down to communication. All comes down to the ability to like, because I wanted to talk about, from our perspective, the challenges and also the triumphs of being opposites, and how that's kind of like helped and hindered our relationship. But yeah, if we look at like to some other people, communication is one of those things, trust is another thing, but also like an openness and a willingness to understand that like your way isn't the highway.
Yeah.
And even though you've lived your life a certain way for a certain amount of time, doesn't mean that there aren't like all of these other beautiful aspects of life to be able to explore. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, communication is definitely ever evolving, and I think ours has gotten better, but still needs overall work.
Yes.
And I think
we've been having I think we've hit a bit of a rough, not a rough patch, but like a bit of a stilted in our communication lately.
I think there's just a lot going on, and I think we've been doing a lot of traveling. We're making a lot of big life changes, moving cities. Working together has always been challenging. So it's just, I think that you always bring us back on track and say, we have to just dig in for the next however many months, because these next 18 to 24 months are going to change our lives for the great. So like, we're both in that and are aware that that's probably why communication is going to be a little sticky right now. But I think that is great communication, that
communicating about the bad communication.
Yeah. And I think we both come from gaps in our parents' communication that I see stand out a lot. Yours is very tumultuous, and you're in fight or flight mode with every argument, which is not good.
No, it's not.
And mine is, one of my parents is very patient with the other, and it's kind of a one-way communication path, which isn't good either.
Like one of your parents is quite avoidant, and the other is very incredibly patient and has to be able to kind of communicate in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I see that reflected in, I mean, I think that, again, I think we both made leaps and bounds, especially like the work that we've done within our own relationship, but also the work that we've done individually. But yeah, I see that glaringly sometimes, where I'm just like, wow, that's so crazy that comes directly from so-and-so.
Yeah.
It is wild. But I also think that like coming from this like whole opposites attract situation, I think it fosters a lot of empathy. Like even just like us talking about our different families. And I think when we understand the rhyme to the reason of why we act certain ways or why we do what we do, I think that fosters empathy in a way that really nothing else can. It's like when you even think about this in like any kind of sense, but like let's use political for an example, right? Like I used to be a bleeding heart liberal. Like I would just like rip my fucking chest open without any real facts backing it up. And when we first met, we had conversations, and then I talked to a couple of other people, and instead of like being so angry at the fact that we were opposite, I started to open my heart and my mind to the fact that like opposites actually quite a good thing. I could learn a lot from an opposite of me. And then I started to calm down, and then I started to read facts, and then I started to educate myself. And then it came to this like this beautiful middle ground where I could like see parts of one side and see parts of another. And it made me a better human being. And I think if you apply that to relationships, and you see that with so many people, where if they're like, they hunker down and they're like, I'm not changing. I'm the way that I am, and I have my interests, and I have the way that I operate, and I have my morals and values, and nothing's ever going to waver that, then you're never going to be happy or successful in a relationship because you're not being open to it. But if you step back for a second and you go, all right, I may not understand, or I may not like the way that this person operates or the way that this person does X, Y, and Z, but what happens if I try to open myself up to it and learn a little bit more about it? Does that make me a better person? Does it at least give me the vantage point of saying, hey, listen, I tried? Like, I think all of those things really come into play when it comes into a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I think human beings at their core are very reactive, and we're very emotion-based. And I think that's what separates those who are less evolved and more evolved. And I think an evolved human being takes control of their thoughts and their brain and thinks instantly, or in a good quick period of time, this is how I feel, but let me take a second to think about this and not be so reactive. And I think that's kind of where we see a lot of these issues, whether it's with relationships or politics, is we're very much a reactive society, and we don't have the patience anymore, or I feel like we're devolving as human beings, where we don't have control of our brains. And, you know, those of us, I want to say us because maybe I'm not us, but those human beings who are evolved and control how they feel and what they say, and allow a normal thought process, can get to a better place of evolvement.
Get to a better place, and get to a better place of just being open. I think at the end of the day, it all starts with just being open. And I think when you're with someone who is opposite than you, which I think if we all really dig down, what is that statistic that you told me about what we're actually attracted to?
So I think it was Andrew Huberman said that, I don't know if it was Andrew Huberman or another one of those podcasts, but that when we talk about that there's one person for everyone, like your one true love, factually, you're probably attracted enough to 500,000 people that you would actually marry in the whole entire world.
And that's like physical and emotional and all of those kind of things.
If you ran into these 500,000 people, you'd be excited to marry them.
And so it just shows you that like there's 500,000 amalgamations of like a person, and one person will be completely opposite to the other. So the fact that you can fall in love and like deign to marry two completely diametrically opposite people just shows how adaptable we are as human beings, and why, like, again, to bring all the way back to the start of this conversation, like when you go into dating with this like type of checklist of going, I want him to be 6'5", I want him to make $100,000 a year, he cannot like sports, he has to be into tech, he blah, 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 all these kind of things, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because you get into a position where you've got these arbitrary check boxes that you have to tick before you get into anything, and you're dismissing 100,000. I mean, 100,000 is excessive, but you know what I mean?
But that's around the world. So you're not going to see these 500,000 people.
No.
I mean, you'll probably only run into a small fraction of them. Maybe it's 1,000, but still, it's 1,000 people.
1,000 people that, like, you might dismiss 800 of them automatically because they don't check those boxes.
And I think it goes back to the previous conversation about us kind of being animals, and, you know, the biology of how we work, because why do people cheat? They have attractions to other people, and you can
no self-fucking control, but anyway.
And you can literally make a lot of relationships work, and you could be with a lot of different people. But I think it goes back to an evolved brain that says, what kind of life do you want? Do you want a life with one person that you're really going to build something with? Or do you want to just have really good relationships with a bunch of people, which is possible, but
with polyamory.
I'm not even saying in the sense of it all at one time, just like, you know, being a dater your whole life. Like, you'll probably have a lot of good relationships, and they'll probably fizzle out, and you'll just do the next one. But in those moments of when it's good, it'll probably be really good. Like, you'll make the most of it. You could find someone sporty. You could find someone super attractive. You could have great sex. You could find someone who loves all your hobbies. But what do you ultimately want in life?
And do all of those things kind of like amalgamate in one person?
Yeah.
Which I don't think they do. I really don't think that there's like a perfect person out there for you. I don't think there's like, I love you very much, but I don't think you're perfect, and I don't think I'm perfect either, right? So we're not perfect for each other, but we're not perfect in the sense, but I think we're perfect for each other in the way in which we've decided, okay, you're my person, you're my lobster, we're gonna figure it out no matter what. I think that in of itself is a really beautiful.
Yeah, because if you're not again, this is for people who want to be in a relationship. If you don't, it's totally fine. But if you are for someone for one specific thing or one thing that you like, you're always going to find someone who's got it better, right? So if you say, I really like this girl because she's so fit and like, I just love it. And then 2 years goes by and it's like, this person's a little bit more fit. And it's like, if you're just going for someone who's fit, you're always going to find someone who's more fit. So where does that leave you,
100%. It's so true. But that's like a really long-term grass is greener effect versus like what we see a lot in dating, where that's just like that's like the incessant slapping. People's going next to next. This person has pretty eyes, but oh my God, this next person has pretty eyes. And it's just like, and then it is just like one factor versus like the person as a whole, which is really interesting. All right, I want to kind of, to round this out a little bit, I want to go into, what are you doing?
I'm just looking at stats.
Is there any that you would like to share?
Let's see. We can cut the ones that
you've already spoken about.
So it says a review of 313 studies with over 35,000 participants found that similarity was a strong predictor of attraction in the early stages of a relationship. A study that looked at more than 130 traits and involved millions of couples over more than a century found that partners tended to be similar for 82% to 89% of traits. Interesting.
That's interesting in of itself.
What do they mean by traits?
Well, I think that just kind of what we were talking about, like interests, hobbies, those types of things.
Yeah, I think it goes deeper in here. So people share many traits. Some studies show that partners share almost 90% of traits such as religious, political, and lifestyle factors. So I think that's what they mean by traits.
Well, I think religious and political are, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like a moral and a value. Perhaps not political so much, but like religious for sure. And personality traits. I mean, but yeah, that goes back into like who you are as people. Like personality in terms of like, are you, I mean, but we're quite opposite in personality. You love pushing a button.
And I think here's like the contrary beliefs. So superficial differences can make people appear more opposed than they really are.
Yep.
Dissimilarity can sometimes be attractive, especially if you believe that there is a good possibility a relationship will develop.
There you go.
Being with somebody with different interests can provide a break from routine and prevent things from becoming too predictable or mundane. I think that one really stands out. And I think
agreed.
We were watching what's the show with Sarah Jessica Parker?
Sex and the City.
We were watching Sex and the City yesterday, and that couple got into a fight, and she said, I think that's their kink. I think that's what turns them on. And I thought about that, and I thought, that's interesting. Maybe having small fights here and there is just a way for you to start a fire and create some excitement where it's not so mundane. And I thought, it's not an awful thought. Because what if every day was just really rosy and calm and simple? But like too rosy, calm, and simple.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I also think like life doesn't allow for that. Like life by nature is a bitch. And I think it already gives us enough ups and downs that like your relationship should be a safe haven. And listen, this may be, again, coming back to our childhoods, of the fact that like I grew up in a roller coaster of a childhood, not in a good way. It was not a fun roller coaster. And so all I crave is sweetness, stability.
But what's a safe haven?
Well, safe haven in terms of the fact that like you're not fucking arguing with each other over like
that's not a safe
shit.
Haven.
That is safe haven.
No, a safe haven is
Don't tell me what a safe haven is. That is safe haven.
A safe haven is where you can feel and be your actual self.
Yes.
Which is not always calm and rosy.
It doesn't need to always be calm and rosy, but you also don't need to pick fights with your partner just to be able to feel some kind of fucking fire. There are so many other ways to be able to create like interest and joy and like
No, I'm not saying
highs.
pick a fight. I told this to my mom when I was like, I don't know, my early 20s, because she was just like, oh, you're being so, like, maybe I was younger. She's been like, you're being so mean to me. Like, I'm the person who cares about you most.
Exactly.
And I thought, no, I'm going through things in life, And if I acted this way towards anybody else, they probably either wouldn't be my friend, they wouldn't want to date me, or they just think I'm an asshole. But you're a safe space where I could have all these world frustrations and just vent them out to you and know that in the moment you're going to be annoyed and think I'm being a dick. But I know for a fact that once this passes, you're my mother and I have this safe space that only I can do this with you. And I think that happens in a good relationship.
I think to some degree, yes, but then I think you really, really start to cross the boundary into like a punching bag. Like if you just decide that like you're the closest person, and we've had conversations like this, you're like, you can't use me as a punching bag. I've said the same thing just because you're the closest person to me. So yeah, you can like vent and you can have like a safe space, but just to be able to feel some kind of fire, just to like create arguments or to like have arguments for the sake of arguing. Well, we know people who that is a kink for them. It's totally a kink for them.
Do we? Who do we know that does that?
I'll tell you off camera, but you know who.
Give me a hint.
No.
We know people that
who like argue with each other constantly, and it's like joking, but also it's constantly, and that you can totally tell that that's a kink for them in some way, shape, or form. It like fuels a fire. It breaks up the mundane day. But I personally, and again, this is where we come into opposites. But like, I don't want that. I don't want to have you come home and be like, rah, 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 and use me as like a punching bag or feel like that's your safe space.
You would agree.
That's not true at all. Absolutely not true. And the fact that you see it that way is laughable. All you do is take your stress out on me with work. Literally all you do.
We're going off topic.
Well, we always do. Do you have any more statistics that you'd like to share with people? Well, I found one that I thought was really interesting. So the New York Post published a survey of 2,000 British adults. I don't know why it was British, but it was interesting. That revealed the primary traits sought after in a future spouse included, I wonder if there was top 3. I wonder if you can figure it out. Primary traits sought after in a future spouse.
Primary traits sought after from whose perspective? 2,000
British adults.
So it's not men and women?
You didn't give us statistics on men and women.
Three attributes.
Primary traits sought after in a future spouse.
Stability.
Financial stability, yep.
Trust.
Nope.
Stability. Sexual attraction.
No, I'm going to tell you now.
Okay.
Include emotional intelligence, financial stability, and compatibility with friends. Isn't that so interesting? Out of those 2,000 people polled, that they're the highest things across the board that people wanted to do.
Those are great.
However, 79% of the participants said desired partners with different qualities, said that they wanted desired partners with different qualities to enhance their relationship. So kind of like what you were just saying then, of like, you want someone different than you so it will enhance your relationship and it will kind of like make it more interesting. That's where I think I'm coming from, and that's where I disagree with you. I don't think that there needs to be like butting heads to be able to create joy and fire. I think the fact that you're different already does that. And so that you should just lean into like the differences but in a joyful way rather than like coming home and be like, rah, 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 and then be like, it's all right, you're my safe space.
Okay.
No? You don't agree?
Yeah, I think it's just two totally different things.
They're not, but all right. To round this out, I think it would be good that we give people some strategies to embracing differences. So I think number 1 is like celebrating each other's strengths, as hard as it is sometimes. Sometimes I really don't like your differences and they really fucking annoy me. But then other times I really want to show you and acknowledge the fact that like I celebrate the fact that you're different than me. And I think that only makes our relationship stronger.
That's nice. Yeah, I would say getting out of your comfort zone. If you stay in your comfort zone and do all the things that, obviously your comfort zone is the things that you like and the things that you want to do. But I think make a really conscious effort to think in the moment, okay, my partner wants to do this. I really don't want to do it because it's getting me out of my comfort zone, but it's going to make them happy and something that's going to broaden our horizons. So let me just do it and see what happens. And I'm sure you'll be happy that you actually did it.
Agreed. I think that like if you really let it will cultivate a sense of more empathy between you two, more understanding and empathy, which you never get enough of in relationships. It's just understanding each other. But I also think that if it comes to a point, and I know that some people don't agree with this, but like I think that if it comes to a point and you love this person, you're just like at a roadblock, go and see a therapist. Like therapy is there for a reason. It's such a wonderful tool, and we talk about often like self-therapizing, which is really good. But there are professionals there for a reason, and sometimes you just need an impartial person to to shine a light on the areas of which like you individually need to do work and together need to do work and utilize it for what it is.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything else to add today, darling?
No, I think for all of our daters and all the people that take our advice, just meet people and get a vibe and eventually talk about what you think about life. And if that somewhat aligns, then keep
Give it a
hanging out
go.
with that person. And I think we always I always like people to stick to 3 things. Like on a first date, did you have fun? Were you attracted to them? And
Can't remember your third thing.
wait, were you attracted to them? Did you have fun? I forgot the other one.
You can just make it 2. I think they're pretty good rules though. Were you
No,
attracted to them?
wait.
Did you have fun?
Were you attracted to them? Did you have a good time? And did they treat you well?
There you go. / did they treat the way it was
So if they treated you well, you had a good time, and you were attracted to them, there's no reason why you shouldn't go on a second date.
100%.
Thank you guys for listening. Happy New Year. We're back. We're going to have some breaking news coming, a lot of big updates with the app.
Yeah.
We love you. Happy dating. Check out one of our past episodes and please subscribe. It goes a long way for us. So we'll see you next time.